first thing Nurse Rachel Lin noticed was the smell. Hospitals always had a scent: bleach, plastic, coffee, blood. But this was different. Sweet, metallic, faintly rotten. Like overripe fruit left in a hot car. The man they brought in was in his early 30s. Caucasian. No ID. Picked up by police near the freight depot after he collapsed outside a vending machine. He wasn't just sick. He was leaking something black from his nose and ears, and his eyes, bloodshot and twitching, seemed locked on things that weren't there. He muttered nonsense, repeated the same 4 syllables over and over under his breath like a stuck record. Rachel glanced at his chart. Fever. 104.1 degrees. Heart rate? Erratic. BP. Falling. The paramedic gave her a look that said, "This one's not coming back." Rachel worked nights at Easthaven Regional, a 12-room facility built in the 70s and never upgraded. It was underfunded, overworked, and rarely full. The kind of place that limped along on the dedication of its exhausted staff. She was used to drug overdoses, minor traumas, the occasional factory injury. But this felt wrong. The man seized twice in under 5 minutes. His skin grew cold, his breathing ragged. They intubated, started fluids, monitored vitals. Then he flatlined. 17 minutes of CPR. No pulse, no response. They were calling it when the man suddenly sat bolt upright, gasping, eyes bulging. Rachel screamed and stumbled back. He stared straight ahead, locked in a full-body arch before crashing backward onto the table. This time, he stayed dead. By sunrise, the ER had taken in 3 more cases. Same symptoms, same black fluid, same rapid deterioration, and then a nurse, Marcus, collapsed during the shift change. That's when the whispers started. Is it Ebola? Chemical exposure? Bioterrorism? They quarantined Marcus in room 3. Rachel sat with him, watched him shiver uncontrollably under 3 blankets. He blinked up at her with red-rimmed eyes. "Something's wrong with the air, Rach," he said. "Feels heavy." She wanted to call her sister, let her know to stay home, but cell service was down. No bars. Even the hospital landlines were cutting in and out. At 11:42 a.m., the hospital's PA system crackled to life. It never did that unless the switchboard operator manually triggered it. A voice, male, unfamiliar, began speaking. "Attention, all hospital personnel. This facility is now under level 4 quarantine. Remain inside. Do not attempt to leave. Military personnel are en route. Follow instructions from federal response teams. Do not interact with patients showing neurological agitation. Repeat, do not engage with compromised individuals." Silence. The staff froze. Outside, black vans rolled up to the main entrance. Men in hazmat suits exited without urgency, like they'd done this before. Behind them came 2 military trucks, their doors stamped with a symbol Rachel didn't recognize. A circle with 3 lines through it, like radio waves radiating from a center point. A nurse screamed as the main doors slammed shut, locking automatically. The magnetic locks weren't even connected to hospital controls. Someone had overridden them. Rachel walked to the 3rd-floor window. Outside, the town of Easthaven was being sealed in. Barricades were going up on the highway. National Guard soldiers were turning traffic around at the county border. A helicopter circled overhead, slow and low, its camera turret tracking the perimeter. And standing by the ambulance bay, watching the building, was a tall figure in a charcoal hazmat suit. Not military, not EMS, just observing. When he saw Rachel watching, he lifted a hand. Not to wave, to point directly at her. By the 2nd day, Easthaven felt like another planet. Power still ran, water still flowed, but no one was allowed to leave the hospital. Not staff, not patients. The front entrance had been sealed with steel security doors. The ambulance dock was under armed guard. Inside, they were down to 6 active staff. Half the team was either sick or locked in isolation rooms. A janitor named Tom had vanished sometime in the night, but no one talked about it. They just quietly crossed his name off the whiteboard in the break room. Rachel knew how infection protocol worked. She'd done emergency drills for H1N1, for Ebola, even for anthrax back in the day. But this wasn't how it went. No CDC team had come inside. The people in hazmat suits didn't introduce themselves. They didn't debrief. They didn't ask questions. They just walked through the hall silently, scanning rooms, making notes on clipboards. Not one ever treated a patient. Around noon, the electricity flickered, and the TVs across the hospital all turned on at once. Each screen displayed a color-coded map of the town. Zones marked in green, yellow, red. Easthaven General was in the deepest shade of red. The screen pulsed with a low-frequency tone. Not loud, but enough to set your teeth on edge. Then, this zone is classified red. Compromise likely. Maintain containment. Expect patient neurological volatility. The staff stared. What the hell does that mean? Someone muttered. Rachel didn't answer. Her attention was on the fine print scrolling along the bottom of the screen. Observe for signs. Photophobia, cranial pressure, auditory distortion, dermal darkening. Recommend isolation upon first symptoms. She blinked. Auditory distortion? That night, Rachel stayed in room 3 with Marcus, the sick nurse. He was worse now, incoherent, thrashing. He had claw marks on his arms from scratching too hard. And every few minutes he'd whisper the same thing. Too loud. The hum. Can't stop it. Rachel checked his ears. No swelling, no infection. But when she turned off the overhead light, his veins glowed faintly under his skin. She ran a scan. Nothing. The machine couldn't detect anything unusual, but she saw it. A faint greenish shimmer, like bioluminescence. Later in the stairwell, Rachel heard voices on the floor above. Floor 4 had been closed for renovation since February. She followed the sound. At the top of the stairs, she found a steel door welded shut from the outside. Spray painted across it in fluorescent orange were 2 words: "Do not open." But someone had tried. The hinges were bent. Scratches lined the inside glass. And from within, she thought she heard a steady thumping, like someone pacing back and forth, or waiting. Back at the nurse's station, she opened her notebook. She'd begun tracking the sick, where they worked, lived, the order they came in. And she noticed something. Every one of the infected patients had come from within a 5-block radius of Easthaven Telecom, the decommissioned satellite relay center outside town, the one that had supposedly been shut down 10 years ago. Only Rachel drove past that building last week. It had lights on. The intercom buzzed again. Same voice as before. New cases have breached Quarantine Zone East. Increased security will be deployed. Do not panic. Remain compliant. The perimeter is for your protection. But Rachel no longer believed that, because when she looked out the window toward Quarantine Zone East, she saw fire and people running and shapes, tall, slow-moving silhouettes like people, but not quite. And one of them stopped, turned, and stared straight at the hospital windows. The next morning, no announcements came over the intercom. No soldiers were seen in the hallway. And the cafeteria, which had been stocked and quietly replenished by people in hazmat suits, was locked with a metal chain, as if someone expected panic. Rachel checked on Marcus. His room was empty. Not just empty, scrubbed, bed stripped, machines gone, surfaces sterilized. There was no record of a transfer. His name was gone from the board. The cameras in the hallway, once blinking green, now flashed red, and a piece of printer paper was taped to the nurse station monitor. Observe. Do not engage. Rachel tore it down. Something was very, very wrong. She wasn't alone in noticing the shift. Dr. Keene, sleep-deprived and trembling, found her in the stairwell later that day. He wasn't the confident, clean-shaven man she'd worked with for a decade. His coat was wrinkled. His eyes were bloodshot. And when he spoke, it was more of a whisper. They're not curing anyone. Rachel leaned against the wall. They're not treating anyone either. Keene nodded. Then there's something on the scans. You ever look at the neural MRI data from the second wave of patients? Rachel frowned. I'm not cleared to access those. He pulled a USB drive from his coat pocket. You are now. She loaded the files onto the radiology workstation in the admin wing, far from the sick rooms. The neural scans were wrong, not just unhealthy, impossible. Some patients showed new folds in the temporal lobe, as if something were growing behind the cortex. Others had electrical spikes in regions normally associated with auditory hallucination and sleep paralysis. One scan made her freeze. The patient was unidentified, but Rachel recognized the jawline, the fractured incisor from a fall last year. It was Marcus. And in his scan, embedded in the back of the brainstem, was a dark mass shaped almost like a spiral. At 6:19 p.m., the emergency alarms activated for the first time since lockdown. Flashing red lights, automated voice on loop. Breach detected. Quarantine compromised. Secure all exits. Do not open external access points. From outside, Rachel heard screams. Not many, but enough. She ran to the ER bay and looked through the narrow windows. A military Humvee was overturned, engine on fire. 2 soldiers lay on the ground, motionless, twisted, and stumbling toward the hospital entrance, arms twitching like a broken puppet, was a man in a hospital gown. His mouth hung open, his eyes were completely black, and behind him came 3 more. They moved like they weren't used to their own bodies, like something else was steering them. Rachel hit the lockdown panel and triggered the inner door seal. The hallway lights dimmed to red emergency mode. Only essential systems now. She knew what that meant. Someone had cut power from outside. She made her way through the darkened halls with a flashlight and found Doctor Keene again, hiding near the surgical wing. They're not patients anymore, he said quietly. She stared at him. Then what are they? He looked toward the hallway, where the red lights flickered. They're receivers. Rachel couldn't sleep, not because of fear or noise or the flickering lights, but because of the hum. It wasn't loud, not constant, but it was always there, just at the edge of hearing, like tinnitus or a song half remembered. And the longer she listened, the more she was sure. It was pulsing. Not random, rhythmic, like code. She found herself tapping her fingers to it without thinking. 3 beats. Pause 2, pause 1. Long pause, repeat. Back in the admin wing, she returned to the MRI scans. The spiral-shaped object in Marcus's brain haunted her. She zoomed in and froze the frame. It didn't look like a tumor. It looked like a circuit. And when she cross-referenced similar cases in the quarantine files Dr. Keene had smuggled from the system, she saw something even stranger. All infected patients had been within 5 miles of a signal tower. Not just any towers, decommissioned ones. Old telecom sites, most of which had been shut down or repurposed. She clicked through file after file until she opened one that didn't belong. It was an audio file, labeled only as FRQ77-incident-Zs. She hit play. Nothing at first. Then, a low pulse, a tonal rise, a whisper beneath it, almost a chant. It made her skin crawl. Halfway through, her nose started to bleed. She yanked the headphones off. What the hell was that? On a hunch, she ran the file through a spectrogram, and there it was. Not sound, but a pattern embedded in the waveform. A shape like the one from Marcus's scan. A coil repeating over and over. A frequency that wasn't just heard, it was implanted. She showed it to Keene the next morning. He didn't even flinch. "I've seen this before," he whispered. "Where?" Rachel asked. "In a DARPA white paper, years ago. Experimental acoustic neuromodulation, the theory that certain signal patterns could stimulate specific brain regions." To what end? Keene stared at her. Not treatment. Control. The hospital intercom buzzed on, but this time no announcement came. Just the frequency. Played over the PA in a low, distorted tone. 3-2-1. Pause. Repeat. Lights flickered in time with it. Rachel saw something move at the end of the hallway. A patient in a gown, no mask, no shoes, standing still, swaying to the sound like he was listening to music only he could hear. And then he turned and walked calmly into a wall, slamming his head against it. Once, twice, again, leaving behind a spiral of blood. The infection wasn't a virus. It was a broadcast. And Easthaven wasn't just under quarantine. It was the test site. Rachel stood in the records room, the audio still playing faintly on loop in her head. The 3-2-1 pulse wasn't just a signal. It was becoming a compulsion. Even with the file closed, she could still hear it, feel it in her spine. That's when she realized it wasn't being broadcast anymore. It was inside her. She reached for the nearest metal tray and smacked herself hard across the ear. Instinctively, desperately, the hum cut out for a moment, then returned. She found Keene in the radiology lab, hands shaking, muttering. "They're not broadcasting anymore, Rachel. It's passive now, viral, transmissible. Through the air. Through us." In the basement level of Easthaven Regional was a sealed archive, full of outdated tech, paper files, and analog backups. She hadn't been down there in years, but after seeing that audio pattern embedded in Marcus's scan, Rachel had to dig. She pried open the old access panel and found the master server drive, still faintly powered. Tucked beneath the cabinet was a folder stamped with a red warning. Project Zephyr, property of the Department of Defense. Unauthorized access prohibited. Inside were black and white photos of signal towers, the same kind surrounding Easthaven. Reports of psychological breakdowns in communities exposed to low-frequency directional waves. Experimental testing in rural sectors with controlled infrastructure. She scanned further. Zephyr-class acoustic induction appears to overwrite targeted neural pathways through sustained exposure to harmonized frequencies embedded in infrastructure-level audio systems. Recommended limits, 3 days. The final page stopped her cold. A map of Easthaven, dated 5 years ago. Zones marked, green, yellow, red. Projected phases, phase 1, exposure. Phase 2, Signal seeding phase 3, remote alignment phase. 4, transfer protocol transfer. To what? Upstairs, the lights in the ER began pulsing again. Faster this time. 3-2-1, then a longer tone. Something new was coming. Rachel ran into Keene on the way back up. He looked different, vacant. They've started phase 2, he said too calmly. What does that mean? Synchronization. They need us coherent to activate the network. The ones who resist get overwritten. He leaned closer. You've heard it, haven't you? It's beautiful, isn't it? Rachel backed away. Keene didn't follow. He just started humming. 3-2-1. That night, Rachel found an empty ambulance parked behind the service bay. Still running. Still unlocked. Someone had tried to leave. Inside the driver's seat, a body slumped forward. When she pulled it back, she saw something carved into the forehead, a spiral etched deep and crudely. Whoever tried to escape never made it past the perimeter. Not because they were stopped, because they turned around. Phase 2 wasn't about infection. It was about preparing minds for something else. And Rachel didn't have much time. The emergency lights had turned blue. No alarms, no announcements, just the soft throb of color pulsing through the corridors. Everyone who was still active in the hospital moved slower now, more deliberate. They didn't talk to one another anymore. They just stared into the lights or listened to the walls. Rachel avoided eye contact, moved silently. Ate nothing she didn't bring herself. And most of all, she didn't listen. She used the trauma ward's ancient computer to reconnect a satellite modem they used for emergency data transfers during storms. It wasn't fast, but it wasn't on the same infrastructure as the rest of the hospital. She hooked it into her diagnostic tablet and typed, Easthaven under lockdown. Patients not infected, controlled. Signal-based transmission. Need extraction. Need intervention. Project Zephyr is active. She routed it through a public relay, pressed send. Nothing happened for 5 full minutes. Then, a ping. A single line of text appeared. We see you. Get to the sub-basement. 733 hertz blocks the signal. Rachel stared at the screen. Who was we? She knew of no sub-basement. She went back to the elevator control panel, pried it open, and used a key from the head engineer's office to override the lock. There it was. Sub-level B. No buttons, only a key switch. She turned it. The elevator hummed, then began to descend. Lower than she thought the hospital was even built. Sub-level B wasn't on the hospital plans. It was cold, concrete-lined, and completely dark except for a single emergency bulb swinging in the hallway. On the far wall, someone had painted in faded red. Sound is thought. They're not sick. They're choosing. And then they built the signal to replace us. Rachel walked deeper, passing old equipment, barrels, sealed doors with military stamps. Then she found a room full of radios. Dozens of them, analog, shortwave, cracked and buzzing. And a man in the corner, skeletal, wrapped in blankets, headphones over his ears, still alive. He looked up at her, one eye milky with cataract. They can't reach me down here, he rasped. You brought it with you, though. Who are you? He gave a crooked smile. I helped build Zephyr. Thought we were curing war. Turns out we were just changing sides. He pointed to an old frequency generator glowing green in the corner. 733 hertz. It cuts the pattern, scrambles the spiral. Rachel walked toward it. You can stop it? He shook his head. Number. But you can slow it down. You can break the sync. She stayed in the bunker for hours, learned everything she could. The man told her the signal wasn't human. It was first detected in 1997, looping under the static of decommissioned telecom relays. It didn't speak in language, but geometry, spirals, frequencies, neuroreactive pulses. Project Zephyr wasn't to contain it. It was to translate it. And Easthaven. A test city, isolated grid, no satellite coverage. No one would notice if a few thousand minds changed. He handed her a USB drive. Proof. Spread it if you can, but don't go back upstairs unless you're ready. Phase 3 is coming. Rachel left the sub-basement just before sunrise. The blue lights were gone now, replaced by white strobes, slowly pulsing in time with a deeper, internal hum she couldn't shake. The hospital was quiet. Too quiet. Everyone was in position, waiting. The elevator doors opened into silence. No hum, no voices, just stillness, like the building was holding its breath. Rachel crept through the ER. Every room was empty. Beds made, machines off. Everyone was gone, except in the main atrium. They were all there. Doctors, nurses, patients. Even Dr. Keene, standing like a conductor. Each one faced a large black screen. Rachel could feel it, the air pulsing like electricity. Phase 3. This wasn't infection anymore. It was alignment. She slipped into the security office. The old surveillance system still worked. She plugged in the USB from the sub-basement. It loaded fast. Raw data, schematics, a final program blinking. Master signal router. Node override. She opened it. A countdown appeared. 001344. It showed multiple towers prepared to broadcast worldwide. Once synced, the signal would be unstoppable. 2 options on screen. Relay uplink. Let it go global purge node. Destroy the source and sever everything. Rachel hesitated. Then the screen behind her flickered. Dr. Keene stood outside the door, calm. "We've already changed," he said. "You've heard it too. You're not thinking for yourself. That was the point." Behind him, others approached slowly. Silent. Empty. "Let them hear it, Rachel." The countdown hit 000037. Her finger hovered over the screen. She thought of Marcus, of Easthaven, of the promise the signal whispered. Not like this. She clicked. Purge node white light. A blaring tone. Glass shattered. Smoke. Sparks. Rachel fell to the floor, coughing. Then, silence. She woke to darkness. No hum, no countdown. She stood. The hospital was still, the atrium frozen. Everyone stuck in place like puppets with their strings cut. Keene whispered, the voice. "It's gone." Rachel walked outside. The fence was broken. No vans, no soldiers, no sound. For the first time since this began, the world was silent. She stepped into the morning, alone, but still herself, for now.